Howdy, y'all, and welcome to the Winter Trilogy with the Presence Posse. We are going to be presenting a threesome for the next 3 weeks, and it is called The Key to Possibilities, Receiving, and Creation. And we're starting the trilogy off today with episode 1, Presence and Possibilities. And today we have almost the entire posse. We have Bobby Fresh Powder Cobb, Dr. Fred Blum, Danielle McMahon, and Miriam Siegel. And we are always glad to see you guys, and especially today because of all the possibilities. Now, I know, Bobby, you were a part of the reason we're doing this trilogy. And so I thought I would go to you first and see if you would like to say anything about it. And our first topic.
Yeah, on presence and possibilities, the thing that I think of with a recent mindfulness coach, or not coach, a client that I was coaching, said to me, the coolest things are just happening over and over again. And he used the word truffles, which I've used a couple of times on this podcast. I stole it from him. He's like, I find the more present that I am, the more little truffles are showing up in my life. And I asked him to explain what he meant by that. And he said, I travel a lot on business, and sometimes I have very limited times to make connection. I'm running from one plane to another. And, the credit card people and the people handing out the little chicken things at the food court and all of that are all trying to get his attention. But he's like, man, I am just running with blinders on. I have no awareness of those people. I'm single focused. And there's a time for that. That is a human superpower to be able to direct your focus and attention on just one level. However, as we do that, we are kind of cutting out our periphery, and we're missing out on all of the things that are there for us. So I hope today will be kind of an exploration of the cool little synchronicities that happen to us all the time. And when we are present, we're much more well positioned to take advantage of those opportunities when they present themselves. So that was my original thought in suggesting this as a category. And I like the idea of a trilogy where we can have a little bit of theme that goes on from one week to the next.
Yes, wonderful. Anybody else want to chime in?
Sure. Because we had such a great sort of prelude to this conversation last week. And to me, I love possibilities is like, it's a frame to look at life through. Like if I want to look at life through the frame of endless possibility, first of all, it's going to take some practice, to be able to hold that frame of reference. But, that's just practice. We can do that. And then looking through that frame of reference is going to give me a very different experience of life than some other frame of reference. Like, for example, life sucks, or I could probably think of a more articulate one than that, but you get the idea. Like, that's a very different experience of life than life is full of endless possibilities. So what I hope to explore today, in addition to what Bobby said, really kind of the same thing, is how to begin to look at life through a lens of possibility, and how this is actually a practical discussion. It's not just Pollyanna, positive thinking or something. It's like, really, what is the value and the practical nature of looking for possibilities in life?
I love that you brought that up. And I think, if it's okay with you, Danielle, before we go to you, everybody who's watching, and even if you're watching the replay, that's such a good question. What is the value and possibilities for you? What do you see in this? I mean, we have this topic, presence and possibilities. What does that mean to you? What comes to mind when you think about that, when you think about possibilities? And it's a good point, like the truffles and the life sucks. Like where is your attention? Right? Because they're
There is a
two
middle way.
very, yeah, very, very different perspectives, right? And then there's all that stuff in between. So please share with us what your perspective is. And even you may not even be aware of what your perspective is. So this is an invitation to actually dive into that a little bit and feel into that and look at that and see where you are on this spectrum. Danielle, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think I will have a thing or two to say here. I wasn't sure what this topic would bring up, but for me, listening to Fred and Bobby talk about it, but particularly Fred when he was talking about a frame or lens, yeah. So this is a lens that we can look through, and our lens can be clouded if we're not present, right? So not too many people so far have said the presence is the key piece in that being the lens that we're able to look through. Because if we're looking through a lens that is clouded with all of our past experience and expectation and what we're told is possible and what's reasonable and all of those things, it's not the same as being present with the possibility of possibilities.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think they go together really, really well, and that expands the possibilities, right, to be present.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that presence allows for possibilities, which allows for presence, which allows for
The virtuous cycle.
Yeah, virtuous cycle. That's beautiful. I'm going to bring in fate into this. I come from a background where, and I mean, many of us have this background, where we're presented with some sort of fate where our life is to go. For example, with women, where we have to wait for a man to choose us. And I remember like being in school and going to the dance, and you wait for the guy to come up and ask you to dance. You don't go and ask him to dance. This is what it was like before. And you're expected to do this. And men were expected to take over their father's business. I remember my family, my dad having a conversation with my brothers. I was the one who wanted to take over the business, but he didn't even look at me. He didn't ask me, because I was the girl. I was expected to get married and have children. And who I was supposed to marry was also fate. So it's all sort of presented as if this is how life is supposed to look for you in your future. And that's what happiness, or at least security, will be. And it's automatically, without necessarily being conscious of it, or without there being any necessarily malicious intent, it actually kind of narrows the possibilities for you, unless you're conscious of that being someone else's idea of your future, of your fate being put on you. And
Well, it
presence,
absolutely narrows the possibilities. I mean, almost by definition.
yeah. And one of the beautiful things, thank you, Fred, one of the beautiful things about presence and coming into our own center is being able to see and evaluate and reevaluate what we've been taught, and what we've been taught to see. Like Bobby, as you were speaking about, you see this, and then there's all of that you don't see. And many of us can live our entire lives from that place, never understanding that it was someone else's idea, someone else's belief. And this can be all kinds of things, like really, and this is not a criticism, this is not any kind of judgment, but I mean, religion can do that. The way it's presented to us, the way we're allowed to or expected to act, what we're allowed to or expected to believe, we end up with a very limited space to move in which to move without seeing the rest of the world. So where I'm looking at this is where presence allows us to experience more, know more, see, hear, feel more, and allows us to make better choices for ourselves and our lives, see the possibilities that we otherwise would not have seen or have not seen up until we become present.
Wow.
That is a lot. And it was awesome.
Really, everyone.
Thank you.
That was a powerful opening. So I hope we can live up to it.
Thank you.
One thing that I want to ask, to me,
Hi, Daniel.
what you're saying sounds a lot more like conditioning than fate. I agree with everything that you said. And if we substitute conditioning, you have been conditioned to wait for the guy to approach you at the dance. Your brothers were conditioned to step up and do the family business. You were conditioned that that's not a woman's place to do. And I think that does very much cut off the possibilities. And I think one of the cool things about presence and self-inquiry is we have the opportunity now in the present to look at that conditioning and say, does that even make any sense anymore? Does it still resonate with me? Maybe it was true at one time and it's just not true anymore. And certainly being present can do that. But I'm tripping over the word fate a little bit with
Can I answer to that?
yeah, absolutely. That's why
Because,
I brought it up.
yeah. Okay, thank you. And yeah, this is beautiful. For me, from my perspective at the time, where I didn't see, I didn't realize that it was presented. I mean, it is absolutely conditioning. That is what is being done. But from my perspective, and from the perspective that was presented, it was my fate. Right? My only fate was to get married and have children and support my husband. That was a woman's fate in general. So yes, absolutely, it's conditioning, but from where we see it, that is my fate. And it was never, it took me a long time to actually even question, is there anything else for me?
Yeah.
Is there anything possible for me? And especially in situations where there is a threat attached. There's some sort of danger presented. God will kill you, or some sort of horrible consequence. There is no other choice. There is that is my fate. So that's why I use the word fate. I don't disagree with you at all. I agree completely with the conditioning.
Well, it's like there are levels that, there's maybe like cosmic fate, where God has ordained this, and obviously I think the stakes get higher too. So like if you displease God, it's eternal damnation.
God help you if you please.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you displease your parents, it's a different set of consequences. But it's like, so we have the fate of expectations, the fate of conditioning, like Bobby says, which is even less probably examined than the fate of like rules in life, like those kind of things. And then there's the fate of, whatever, the religious or cosmic forces, whatever. I think there's a certain sort of dichotomy between, on one level, I mean, if we define victimhood really broadly, like just saying any circumstances at all, cause me to be or feel a certain way or behave, that's, someone could say in the broader sense, that's being a victim to whatever that is. And maybe the opposite pole of victimhood in this case would be choice. Like that ability to get in the present, from presence, to say, what is true for me in this moment? Can I, like Bobby points out, can I examine my past conditioning and, get present with that in a way that maybe I really do have a choice as to whether or not to take that same tunnel again. Um, and the extent to which we are in that victim conditioned consciousness, mind, whatever, I don't think there is choice. I think we can only choose from a place of freedom. Otherwise, it's just our programming, saying whatever it says.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is, it's basically impossible for me to choose something I don't see.
Mm-hmm.
But when I do see it, suddenly there's a completely different life, a different world for me. And then I need to look more closely at what are my actual choices, what are the possibilities. And I had a person ask a very important question. This is many years ago. He said, I won't say the exact question, I'll change it a little bit, but the question was basically, who are you in danger from? And it was brilliant, because all of a sudden I sat there living in a different country on my own, and it suddenly hit me that nobody's here anymore. Like, it was like the ones that generally would have done me harm were nowhere near me, and I was also grown up. So
Yeah.
there was a different opportunity there. I'm so grateful to that person for having asked that question.
Yeah. And some
Because
people would call
it
that
brought me present. Beg
Yeah.
pardon?
Someone might call that, a variation or a form of PTSD.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have someone saying hello. We don't know who it is. It might be
From the ocean.
Rosalie, but we'll see.
If I were a betting man.
Yeah. Hi. Okay. Danielle, do you want to get in here?
I have a little bit of background noise, so I keeping myself on mute so that it doesn't end up on our presentation here. It's interesting. There's a little synchronicity for me going on in the conversation, kind of having taken the turn when you spoke about the conditioning of women in particular, right? Like our narrowing of possibilities for our social role. And I think that goes like it got expanded to religion. So then it applies to all genders, right? But I did facilitated a discussion on masculine and feminine energies over the weekend. So it was very interesting to me that you brought that up. And for me that's the way that I'm thinking about it now, which is a different possibility than male and female, because masculine and feminine energies are in each of us. Right. So if we pay attention to how we relate to them and how they relate to one another within us, then we can probably affect a change. I see that possibility differently than outwardly being against the conditioning, against the societal rules and roles and all of those things, which I did when I was in college. I marched. I was a president of the university's chapter of the National Organization for Women. Thank you. And I have a minor in women's studies, and I learned all about the absolutely appalling oppression that's gone on, right? So that was a certain way for me to be at that time. And many years later now, I'm more like, okay, so if I learn within myself that, first of all, my balance of feminine and masculine energies is perfect for me. It doesn't have to be different, but also that they can be supportive of one another and not be adversarial. I have a whole different realm of possibility open to me.
Mm. Would you like to say even more about that?
As I become present to both the masculine and feminine energies within me, I can honor their strengths and support them in their weaknesses instead of condemning them for what they're not and judging them for what they're not. And as that develops inside of me, then that carries out, right? So I don't treat men as adversaries because they are the personification of masculine energy, and some of them aren't, right? They're not. So I can start to see people for who they are, what balance they have of those energies, and be present with who they are and with who I am as a perfection.
Because, yes, because there's this perfect possibility, isn't there?
Yes.
Of just being exactly
It's
that.
called whatever's happening.
Yeah. And no animosity, no resistance, no trying to change anything, no judgment. It's just, this is actually me right now and right now and right now. And it's perfect. It's perfect. And the possibilities are endless.
The famous spiritual teacher, Krishnamurti, I think it was J.G. Krishnamurti. He's been dead for a while now, but not in the 1900s. And someone said something to the effect, I've asked him, can you tell me the secret to, eternal well-being or something? And his remark was, or his answer was, I'm not afraid of what's happening. Something like that.
And you don't fight. He's probably saying that he's not fighting what's happening. And, that's, to me, like Danielle, as you were going through the masculine and feminine energies, I was just thinking, at any moment, we are standing on the edge of infinite possibilities. We have probably what's going to happen. But think about as we get stressed, one of the things that happens as we get stressed is our access to resources and our access to shifting perspective and thinking about how are the masculine energies or the feminine energies interacting. Or I use, when I'm working with people, this is what your heart is telling you, or what your mind is telling you. What is your heart and what does your gut tell you? And two things happen. Is one is it gets them out of that thought loop that's going over and over again, and that creates a little bit of space. But in order to answer those questions, you have to check in with yourself because your mind's running on autopilot. What does my heart tell me? What does my gut tell me? Sometimes I'll ask, what does infinite mind tell you, or infinite possibilities tell you? And just merely going through that exercise, it gets us a little bit out of the robotic thing. People, they frequently talk about shadow work and dark emotions. And I don't particularly like those terms myself. However, I do like the idea of the darkness, because as we are getting darker and darker emotionally, we can only do those things we know how to do in the dark, which are our most conditioned responses. They are those things that are, our neural network has created this info superhighway that we can, if the lights went out and I was dark here, I could still get out of the house because on some level I've got the floor plan memorized, and I know where the bookcases and the chairs and everything else are. If I was in any of your all's homes, I'd be completely lost. And I think that's what happens to us oftentimes when we're too attached to one outcome. We can almost watch our emotions rise and fall, our emotional state, based on what we perceive the likelihood will be that we're going to achieve that outcome. As it's slipping away, it's like, oh no, it's going farther. Danielle, if you watched the football game, you probably had a a moment like that watching the Lions yesterday. It looked so good for so long, and then it was like, oh no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I
And-
kind of knew that team was going to come out different after the half.
We have a question. I'm just going to put this up here.
Who's the Presence Posse?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that question. It depends how, I mean, how are we going to understand that question? Who's the Presence Posse? Because
I think what we ought to do is
I.
save that to the very end. And as our outro, we will answer your question if you either hang with us or wait to the end, Kevin, because we always leave with a little things about what's going on next. And sometimes we begin with a little bit of an introduction. Sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So
he may want
one of
to
those
even
ways we
deeper
just dove right in.
He may want to know more about us than even that, and maybe
Yeah.
we'll answer that question too.
We have a group for that. Go ahead.
Yeah. I have a couple of thoughts on what Bobby said. First of all, I'll say them in the opposite order that I heard them. First, the thing about like holding on to a choice too tightly. I agree with you on that. First of all, there's kind of these two broad schools when people talk about goal setting or creating or manifesting, whatever you want to do, which I believe, by the way, this is just me personally, I believe that's our birthright as humans, is that we are creators. And so it's good to sort of understand the rules of creation a little bit, maybe. And so the two broad schools of thought are, one side is very specific goal setting. They want to be able to visualize like exactly what the house that they want looks like and exactly what hill it's on. And I walk through each room and I can see the art on the walls or whatever it is. I mean, apparently some people claim that's helpful. To me, that looks exhausting. But it also looks like I know better than whatever this infinite intelligence that creates the stars and the trees and cows and horses and us knows that I know better than it what I should create. So the method that I kind of is speaking in a broad way about a home and maybe how I want to feel in that home and what I want to experience in that home. I wrote something like that once. It's like I live in a magical place that feels like a sanctuary for myself and other people. Now that could take many forms, right? It doesn't have to be on a hillside. But so anyway, that's just what, I think when we hold on too tightly, like Bobby said, sometimes we can lose possibility for like that tunnel vision kind of thing. But then the other thing you're talking about is this infinite road that stretches out ahead of us. And what I've been thinking about lately is like from the present moment, I think of it like we're almost sending like a template out into the void that sort of creates the future for us. I think of it as a road that's building itself as we walk it. And if we're creating from some kind of fixed identity, the ego, our past, the particular set of limiting beliefs that comprise who we think we currently are, then the future is going to look a lot like the past, but if we step into that moment of possibility, this is like, I'm probably going to quote it badly, but, in physics, they talk about, infinite dimensions and this kind of thing. And like if we, I believe, send a different template, I'm being this person, I'm being my past. Now I'm being something that I create in the moment. I create myself in this moment, and that sends out, literally creates a different road for me to walk. And this me in the present doesn't feel like, like a glitch in the matrix sort of thing. It just feels like life is unfolding, but I think that there is something there about, like, I think the first step in the process is to really get in the present, to become who we are, to become more relatively free from the ego. So it's not just our worthiness or something that's dictating what we create or our need to be worthy. And once we do that, we are in that place of choice where we can look out, and then we can look out into the world and say, what looks like fun, or what looks like would be an amazing contribution, or what does my heart or my gut tell me wants to happen? And we can align with that possibility instead of just unconsciously being in that. We're still creating. They're both creations. One is just an unconscious creation. One is more intentional.
Mm. As I listen to you, I'm reminded of, and I'll probably get this wrong, and I don't care. It's the intention behind it. For example, in the 12-step programs where they talk about, it's kind of like life happening while you have other plans, and some people talk about God's plan instead of our plan. and this idea of manifesting. I mean, there's so much out there about manifesting abundance, and manifesting your dreams, and manifesting everything that you want, and then possibly what you want based on your life up until now, not necessarily having seen that there are infinite possibilities. And then life shows up and says, wait a minute, maybe not, doesn't necessarily match with what you're trying to manifest based on your limited perspective, for example. And I've mentioned earlier that about a year ago, I had a really bad, one of the worst experiences of my life. And it knocked me so flat that all the things I've learned about sort of getting things out of the way to be present and bring my true self didn't work. It's like nothing helped. It was just pain all the time. And so I just had really no choice but to be present to that and just invite that, well, I don't know why this is happening. I don't know what I'm supposed to learn from this. So I just have to be open to the possibility that I will get the information when the time is right. And I couldn't really do anything other than that. It was like, okay, I had an idea of what my life was going to look like, and it went boom, something completely unexpected. And it's that sort of turning it over. I like that sort of 12-step. I'm not an expert on 12 steps, but there's this idea of turning it over. So turning it over to life, and it's like, okay, whatever is going to happen, whatever was supposed to be my journey here, I'm just putting one foot in front of the other and being open to the possibility of whatever, and that I can handle it.
Yep.
I am, the possibilities become endless. I mean, they're endless anyway, but I mean, they become consciously endless for me the moment I acknowledge and remember that I can handle it, and or that I can get help if I am not sure how, or if it
given these current circumstances, what do I choose to create?
Yeah. And it was an incredible lesson for me this past year, in that is just like releasing it, give it away, turn it over, let it go, and keep going and keep living your life and doing whatever. Like you say, look for the fun, or being just noticing in me the life spark. Right? It's still there. The true me is still there. I'm still me. There's just a whole bunch of clouds in the way. So, and the weather does clear up eventually. And just trusting and trusting. And that is, for those of you watching, if you haven't had an experience like that, trust can be trained. It can be remembered and it can be trained. And part of becoming present and releasing a lot of things that we have, like fears and clouds in the way of possibilities, is training ourselves to trust. Trust that we can handle it. Trust that there's something out there. We will learn what we need to learn. We will experience what we need to experience. It's still fun. We're still us, etc., etc., etc. It may take some time, but it can be trained. I'm looking at you, Danielle, again. I've talked a little bit about 12-step programs and things that I've learned. I don't know if you want to comment anything more about it, but I'm just checking with you. You don't have to say anything, of course.
I certainly have participated in 12-step programs and never really thought of them as being presence programs, but perhaps it is, right? Like one of the major mottos of the 12-step program is just for today. You don't have to behave differently for the rest of your life. You just have to do it for today. And if you can't do it for today, do it for this hour. And if you can't do it for this hour, do it for this 5 minutes. If you can't do it for this 5 minutes, do it for this minute, right? So they break it down to just be present. Just be present now and just for today. And then you get all those questions about, okay, so if I'm not in charge, not in control, how does this work? If I'm supposed to stay present, then how do I plan? Am I not supposed to set goals? And all of those things that we overreact to because we're sort of in that state. For me, I was in a state of I had repressed my emotions for so long that when I began to feel, I was like, oh, this probably is good. I should feel, even though I feel horrible or I feel right. I don't even know how to name these things, and I learned how to name them, and then I was pretty excited that I could feel again and that I could function in emotional world at all. And then somebody said, yeah, but your emotions are not supposed to control you either. That's like the tail wagging the dog. And I was like, well, maybe I'll get there. But for right now, I'm kind of glad to be awake to life.
I don't think feeling means your emotions are controlling you. I just think it means you're aware of that dimension of life.
Right. And I think what that person was saying was that I'd gone a little far down that road, right? To allow them. So then they were telling me what to do instead of
that's fair.
Sort of integrating it with my rational intellectual abilities as well. And that's when Bobby was talking about, having this goal and we got to get to this plane, and you have that narrow vision of that. Then, yeah, it was a huge expansion of my vision of the world to be able to feel, but it did need a little balancing. So I wasn't just kind of floating out there with my emotions.
I'm actually going to go to you, Bobby, because if it's okay for you, and even if it's not, you have mentioned I trust you can handle it. There are so many possibilities.
We'll see.
You had mentioned earlier about this mind, asking the heart, asking the gut. Maybe I'm paraphrasing, but this is how I recall it. And I mean, I do this also with clients. They don't always agree. I mean, when we're looking at what's going on and what possibilities, there can be actually not agreement between mind and heart and gut. And then what?
Well, that's when the fun starts, I think. And actually when I'm asking those particular questions, it's normally when I perceive that the person that I'm interacting with is on a one-way street. It's ride or die. This has got to happen. And in my experience, that is a superpower while you are making progress to your goal. However, that superpower also becomes debilitating if you get off track. And now you're just wound up into the fact that, the goal, I can feel it slipping away. And your ability to access other resources diminishes. And I'll give you another example of that in a second. But the goal of those questions is just to create some different perspectives and get off of this mental lock that this isn't going the way that I wanted it to go, and it has to go the way that I wanted it to go. And now I just want to create a little room for some additional possibilities. Here's the other example of that. Almost everybody has had the experience of having an event that happened in their life that when they were going through it, it seemed like the worst possible thing that could have happened. And 3 weeks later, 3 months later, 3 years later, all of a sudden in the rearview mirror, it's like, wow, it felt like doo doo when I was going through it, but it was actually one of the greatest gifts that I've ever received because it launched me on this whole different path, which has been wonderful. So when, I get, in particularly in hypnosis, this is useful because I can get people to recall moments like that very vividly. And through the trance work, now we can create a curiosity around what am I missing? Because I have this so much of this lived experience. I don't necessarily believe this, but this is what people settle on, that life happens for a reason and it serves me. And just as a mental framework and as a prism to view the world through, anybody can see that, if you can shift from the ride or die, this one-way street that I'm on has to lead me to my destination, or life as I know it is over, versus somebody who's thinking everything that happens, every little mistake in some way or another is a gift and it's serving me. I feel frustrated right now. What does that frustration tell me? I'm not seeing all of the possibilities that are out there. And ultimately, that can become like a huge pattern interrupt. It's one of those rumble streets on the highway of life that just gets our attention. I have a new car, and my new car, my old car used to beep when I was losing the lane. It would do beep, beep, beep. This one is so much better because my steering wheel starts vibrating almost violently. So it is creating the rumble strip feeling mechanically, and it gets me right back into my lane again. And I've said many times on many podcasts, our emotions are never telling us about our circumstances. They're an internal weather report. And sometimes it tells you it's snowing like hell, visibility is almost nothing, driving conditions are not safe. You need to sit back, take a break, and plow the roads a little bit. Sometimes it's just an indication for a pause because things start to speed up. As we get panicky, our mental RPMs, our mental tachometer is like, hurry up, do something, our inner critic is just screaming at us. And all of these things that we've been talking about today are just ways to invite ourselves into a little bit of a space of clarity where we can think clearly and just see what we're missing. What am I not seeing here? And that is the nature of every aha moment, that you're sitting there struggling with your problem, you're frustrated, you have to leave and get out of the circumstances and walking the dog or shoveling the snow, washing the dishes, taking a shower. All of a sudden, boom, the space was created for wisdom to come through. And in that moment, we had the ears to hear the whispers of wisdom that were tapping us on the shoulder.
I saw you, Fred. I'm going to jump in for 30 seconds because it reminds me of putting my hand on the hot stove, and it's hot, so it burns my hand. And so I don't put my hand on the hot stove. But do I ask, is it hot now? Because the stove isn't always hot, is it? If I don't ever ask the question, if I don't ever try anything other than that one thing and that one experience, I'll never know. And maybe it is hot next time, and maybe it isn't. Well, then I have another possibility.
And you learn to observe subtle cues, like is there a button turned to hot?
Yeah, for example, and also trust that, okay, I'm okay. I don't have to lean on the thing and leave my
Yeah.
hand there. I can, okay, how can I test this? Okay, let's, for example, okay, that was fine. So I just want to throw that in there. Variations. Go for it, Fred.
Sometimes I think Bobby and I may be the same person. Because
Well,
like-
that made my day, Fred.
mine too. Because what you're saying, it's like I was talking with a client this morning, and we sort of came up with this 4-step model, and it was so close to what you're saying. And if I could, I'd like to just share it briefly, because I just think it's very much in line with what you were saying. So essentially, how we respond to any circumstance or any stress, whatever it is going to depend on what I was calling this morning our level of resourcefulness, like our ability, like how much available energy do we have? And energy could be like in the form of attention or physical energy, whatever it is, to respond to whatever the current circumstance is. And that's got to do both with us and, of course, the level of intensity or challenge of the circumstance itself. So somewhere in between we meet. And sometimes it's just completely too much for us. And like my client said, she had a moment over the weekend where she just had to like sit in a chair and rock, like she had no resources. And so in that moment, really all there is to do is to begin to build resources again. And the two things that I came up with this morning, and we probably could list a bunch more, are breathing. So we could have a whole conversation about how to breathe, to begin to bring ourselves, because essentially what that is, that first step is fight or flight. Okay. So when we're in fight or flight, it's not time to do deep work, period. It's time to circle the wagons, do some breaths, put your feet on the ground, all that kind of thing. So you can begin to see I'm safe. Okay. Now, the second stage I called overwhelm. So overwhelm is like a mental state. It's not physiological. It's like, holy crap, I have so much to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to think about it. And the analogy we came up with, and you guys have said, I forget, someone said, Miriam was talking about the cloudy sky. Another version of that I love is the snow globe. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So the snow globe is like your state of mind. So if you shake up a snow globe, okay, that's like your mind, right? Going over. Now, so we had some hilarious examples of what do people do. So one thing people do is they try and pick each snowflake and put it down on the ground one at a time, So like, I'm going to deal with my anger issues and my loneliness and my sadness, right? So that's one thing people do. Other people actually shake the globe up more, I'm so upset. Let's see what this does, And so it just creates a bigger mess. We had a whole bunch of funny ones. Wishing or hoping the snow would settle, people do that, or blaming someone else for why it's not settled. How much good does that do? But we know for sure that if we just let it settle, like if we just put it down, it's going to settle all by itself. And so sometimes in overwhelm, the best thing we can do is just to step away from it for a moment. What I call healthy distraction, like go watch Netflix or do some chores or something and let your mind settle. And maybe later you can come back to it and it'll seem clearer. And then the third step, we call noticing, which is just learning to observe now. You're noticing what's happening. I like to do what's happening in my body, but some people like what am I thinking? What are my limiting beliefs? But we're just beginning to pay attention. But it's an active process. It's an active process of paying attention to your body or to your thoughts or whatever. And the final stage, which is what I call presence, which is just at peace with what is. So now, like my favorite line from The Big Lebowski, I hope you guys have all seen that movie, where in the very end, Jeff Bridges says, the dude abides. You know, um, because that's it, right? In presence, there, you know, in pure presence, obviously there are levels to this, but you know, like Krishnamurti says, I don't mind what's happening. You know, Byron Katie says, you know, I've stopped arguing with reality. And so it's just this hierarchy. And it's like we, you know, so like from fight or flight, maybe we can get to that place of overwhelm where at least our mind is online. From overwhelm, maybe by taking a break, we can get to that place of being able to notice and pay attention. And if we do that enough, we have more and more presence that we can, you know, avail ourselves of.
And I'd love to tag on to that, because the overwhelm, I love that description of it as a mental state. It's where we are getting less and less resourceful, and our mind is speeding up, and so we're moving constantly toward the fight or flight. And I love that you went right to the breath, because when we're in fight or flight, the natural thing to do is take a big inhalation and hold it
Right?
and see what's going on. And I've had coaches, my coaches, talk to me, and when I was melting down, and they say to me, you know, are you breathing? I can't hear you breathing. And it's like, wow, I've said that 1,000 times in the past year to my clients, but still I can get stuck in that state. And looking at overwhelm, you know, so many people think being overwhelmed is like a failure somehow, that you were not able to handle things, and it's like something that we have to tamp down or wish away. However, if we are the dude and if we do abide, then we can just say, wow, I'm finding this really, really overwhelming. And if you have enough presence to say, what should I do right now? Rock in place, breathe, go wash the dishes, take a break, look, shift from different perspectives, and really tapping into being real with that emotion, and then saying, all right, what do I do here? And there literally are a million possibilities when we're present. When we're time traveling out in the future, when we're clinging to a specific outcome,
Or a
when
past.
things, yeah, or the past, and things are not going the way, or if we're stuck in the past, looking for the blame as opposed to, you know, what's going on here right now and what can I do about it? Either of those time traveling things are extremely debilitating, because they suck away the possibilities that we can access in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I actually want to say something about blame. And it's thanks for bringing that up, because I think a lot of people, blame can feel, if I'm speaking from my own experience, blame can feel like kind of a relief. You know, it wasn't me, it's you. You have to do something, or is happening because of you. And it can feel like it's not my responsibility then. It's not my guilt. It's not about me. But what it's actually doing is taking all my power away. Because the
It's
moment
giving it away.
yeah, giving, that's what I was looking for. Thank you for the correction. It is the moment I blame someone else, make them responsible. It's like they decide what I feel. They decide what my world is like. They decide what possibilities I have. It's all about them, instead of, I'm actually doing this. On some level, consciously or unconsciously choosing this. And we talked earlier about how whether or not it's possible to choose in a situation, for example, of overwhelm or whatever. But the giving away of our power keeps us stuck in that pattern, or we risk it keeping us stuck in that pattern of the fight and flight and the overwhelm and all of that. and having us be at the mercy of everyone and everything. The moment I take responsibility for my experience and my choices, that is the moment where I have unlimited possibilities to do something else or keep it the same. But it's mine. I own it. All the power is with me. So I don't know if any of you watching have had that experience where you're blaming somebody else and it feels good to blame and make it about they did this, they're the reason why I feel the way I feel, or they are the reason why my life is like this. Yeah, I'm not saying people can't do nasty things, but then the responsibility is on me, if I'm speaking of my own experience, what I do with that situation.
And it could be anything. It could be leaving a relationship.
Anything.
It could be punching somebody in the face. I mean, that might be the most appropriate response to certain circumstances.
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't mean you're just going to have to go meditate on it and be peaceful and loving. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not what it's about. And also when we limit ourselves to that, I have to be peaceful and loving, I have to be a good whatever. It's like, yes, says who? That may not be appropriate for this particular moment and this particular situation. The thing is, if we have to be peaceful and loving all the time, how do we stand up for ourselves? How do we protect ourselves if we need protection? There is something to be said for positive aggression. It doesn't mean you have to beat people up, but there is something to be said for being able to take care of ourselves, use our power in a positive way to make sure that we are living our lives and experiencing the good that life has to offer, instead of just being kind and good and treating ourselves horribly and allowing everyone else to do the same because we don't take advantage of the actual healthy power that we have.
Personally, I'm in favor of some people getting a good beating, but that could be. And that's
may be what they need.
That's why, the Shaolin monks had to learn Kung Fu, because they were meditating all the time and they started getting, it was very a lawless time and people were robbing them. And so they had to learn to defend themselves.
So, yeah, I don't know that loving and kindness are synonyms. I think you can be lovingly assertive.
Well, I don't think assertive and kindness are opposites either.
Right? Yeah. I don't think that
I think you mean niceness.
Okay.
Like you could be kind.
Loving doesn't have to look kind. It doesn't have to look sweet, nice, whatever, right? It can look like there is in women on the day their child is born, a warrior energy that gets awakened.
Yeah.
And my daughter told me this recently, right? She's a fairly new mom. On the day her child was born, she knew that she would do anything it took to defend that life that she brought forth, right? That's still love. That's motherly love,
yes.
Right? So it's not, I just wanted to say that because, I believe that love can have very different expression depending on the circumstance.
The warrior heart. I've heard that called.
I love that. And including loving ourselves, and perhaps especially loving ourselves. There is a
ferocity.
Ferocity. Yeah, there's loving fiercely does not necessarily limit itself to other people. It is loving myself fiercely.
That's nice.
And that can be a complete game changer. Again, if I love myself fiercely, what does my world look like? What possibilities do I have? Again, endless. And am I willing to fight for them? Doesn't mean fight in a way that I hurt other people deliberately. It is just, this is what I want. This is what I'm going for. Allowing the flexibility and not giving up on myself. Okay, we are at the hour.
Just like that.
Posse.
So
It's time to answer Kevin's
yeah,
question.
let's answer Kevin's question. That's exactly where I was
If
going.
he's still with us, even if he's not.
Even if he's not, he can watch the replay as well. Go for it. Who wants to jump in? Who's the Presence Posse?
The Presence Posse is a gathering of presence practitioners and teachers.
Ah.
And
And what's our purpose?
what's our purpose?
Yeah.
To be loving. How about that?
There you go.
Well,
So-
and to also help people consider the power of presence in their lives. I mean, for us, we all have stories of how this practice has really transformed our lives and given many of us to realize that we are the happiness that we seek.
Right.
And an amazing thing happens when if you've spent your life chasing your tail and suddenly realize the tail is part of who you are, and all of this energy spent on chasing the tail is unnecessary, it's superfluous, then that just frees up an enormous amount of bandwidth to do lots of other stuff. So we explore that.
I just thought of tail being spelled T-A-L-E.
Oh, there's that too.
Yes.
Yes. Well, and I would add, what is the purpose of the Presence Posse? Because I think Danielle's description of who we are is pretty straightforward. Is that we share from our own experience, what presence means. I mean, most of this stuff we're just making up as we go on these conversations, and at least I'll speak for myself, but I think it's safe to say, yeah. Miriam's reading it from a teleprompter.
I just got fierce now.
Yeah, you did. I was scared for a second, but I mean, it's like, and maybe just because we have, taken the time, and because each of us in our own way do this, even as for professionally, that we maybe spend a little more time in this conversation of what is presence, and so whatever that level of experience that we may have to share, that, as Bobby said, may be beneficial to people, to offer a perspective that, maybe everyone else doesn't have time to read all the books and the videos and the conversations. And so maybe we can help shorten that learning curve a little bit.
Yeah,
I like that.
We're 6 people from different areas of the world as well, different backgrounds, different experiences, mostly somewhat similar ages. And we bring our own perspectives, and we share our experience, and we share some practices that we hope support other people in becoming aware of their own presence.
Yes.
I like to think of presence as always being there, and then whatever I put in the way. Or my true self is always being that one thing, and whatever I put in the way is sort of the practice. So that is the Presence Posse, and I hope we've answered your question, and you are more than welcome, any of you, to write more questions in the Presence Posse, the free Presence Posse Facebook group. That's where you'll find us on Facebook. And the other thing is, we do a weekly roundtable talk on all things present. So next Monday,
have a trilogy.
Yes, is the 2nd episode of our trilogy. And that was relations, wasn't it? I think.
Receptivity.
Yeah, thank you. Receptivity.
Or receiving.
I knew it was something with a...
It's always a possibility, and receiving. And then what's the third one?
Creating.
Yeah.
Creating. See, they're all in that theme.
Yeah.
So you are welcome even to go into the Presence Posse group ahead of time and prompt us a bit. What do you want us to talk about during our next talk on receiving? What do you wonder about? We are very happy to receive your questions and comments, and we look forward to seeing you again next Monday at the same time. And thank you, everyone, for watching and participating. And if you're watching the replay, let us know, #replay in the comments. I thank Danielle McMahon, Bobby Fresh Powder Cobb, or
Mhm.
Kobe1, and Dr. Fred Blum, and I am Miriam Siegel, for participating in this week's edition of the Presence Posse Presents. Take care, everyone. See you next week.
Bye.